Willie Sandry, the Thoughtful Upholsterer with you, and today I'm going over the setup procedure on the Consew DCS-S4 Skiving machine. And I'll show you how to go from this to a fully assembled skiving machine ready for your workroom. A lot of times I'll mock up the table before I commit to a permanent assembled position, and typically I'll give myself about an inch between the leg set and the back of the table and about 3 inches on the right side of the table, and that'll just make sure to leave any room that you might need for a drawer under that left side. And operator position relative to the machine is one of our main considerations. So if you're not ready to commit to a permanent position, just secure that with some deep reach clamps or whatever you have available. And we'll unpack the box and start accounting for all the goodies along with the head of the skiver. Oh yeah! Start by installing the servo motor just like you would on any industrial sewing machine. Now luckily the table is pre-drilled for those 3 carriage bolts, and the hardware is installed in this orientation. These rubber spacers go between the table and the motor just to isolate it from any vibration. Then a flat washer, lock washer, and nut. And just make sure to center the pulley in the table slot before you tighten down those 3 carriage bolts. With the belt tensioning adjustment on the motor about mid-range, install the drive belt that you intend to use, a 32-inch V-belt in this case, to help position that skiver. So the table won't come pre-drilled for these hinges, so there's a couple things to consider on exactly where to locate the machine. Slide the machine towards you to start to snug up that belt, and then visually align the pulley on the machine with the pulley on the motor. Next, use a combination square or something similar to make sure that the machine is square with the front of the table. And finally, just peek inside the machine to make sure there's plenty of clearance for any of the waste to fall down below the table. Secure 4 screws through the hinges to permanently mount the machine, and depending on where your table is drilled, that may mean that one of the motor mounting bolts is right up against your machine. One thing that you really want to pay attention to before you commit to permanently mounting the machine is that there's some clearance between the belt and the front of that slot in your table. Just for reference, my machine is set about 4 5/8 inch off the front of the table. Of course, that'll vary some depending on the length of your drive belt, 32 inches in this case. And this is why I like a mock-up approach, because I can step back and take a good look at the machine. Do I like the position of the treadle rod and the overall operator position? If everything looks good, go ahead and secure the tabletop to the leg set. Account for the rest of the parts that come with your skiver kit, and we'll get things assembled. This crank handle goes here, and that's just to advance the bell knife after it's been sharpened several times and you need to reposition it, and that's tightened in place with a single set screw. The top cover goes in place here, and that's secured with a thumb screw and bracket from the back of the machine. Just make sure that the part with a 45-degree bevel on it on that bracket is facing up, and that'll make sure it locks into that plate in the correct position. Next, locate these 3 thread extenders to mount the side belt guard on your machine, and thread those into the 3 corresponding holes that line up with your belt guard. And now that belt guard has a nice place to attach, and that just secures with 3 pan head screws. There's a spring tensioner bracket you should be aware of. When you first get your machine, it may be in this neutral position or just hanging down below the machine, but to use it, you want to hook it right here so that this whole mechanism that controls the feed roller is spring-loaded. It's adjustable, but I like to have it on the 2nd position from the end most of the time. Before you turn on your machine for the first time, loosen this jam nut and thread this knob inwards so that the feed roller is spaced some distance away from the bell knife, and then you can fine-tune it as you get started with your projects. And that distance will usually be 1/2 millimeter for thin leather or closer to 1 millimeter for thick leather. And you can store all the specialty spanner tools in your storage drawer. This one you'll use once in a while. It's actually a dressing tool for the sharpening stone that's built into the machine. Now when you turn the machine on, you should notice that the feed wheel turns clockwise and the bell knife spins away from you. Now if you're noticing the reverse, it just means that the direction on your servo motor is switched the wrong way. Well, most lock stitch sewing machines will have the switch on this side. For a skiver, switch it over like this. And add a nice LED light if you want. This cool light is my favorite because it's got a long 30-inch reach and works with just about any machine. So setup on this machine is really not too bad. The main thing is just locating the skiver on the table, and you'll just use that slot in the table as well as the belt length as your guide. Get that installed, and the rest of it is pretty straightforward.